So, welcome back. I hope you had fun writing your legacy letters. Right now, we're going to start. We're not going to start with a check-in. Instead, we're just going to go into a meeting where there'll be 3 or 4 of you in a group and to discuss how the process of writing a legacy letter went for you. After the group, we'll share a little bit, and then we're gonna go around the circle, and I'm gonna ask each person to share who they wrote a legacy letter to and what it was about. And you can pass. If you didn't do it or you don't want to share it, you can pass. But it's really helpful for other people to hear what kind of legacy letters other people are reading because it gives them all writing because it gives them all kinds of ideas. So, Randall?
Before we do that, would it be okay if we took 1 minute to get centered?
Oh, yes, that'd be great. So let me just finish giving these directions and then we'll do
Okay,
that.
go
Okay,
ahead.
so first we're going to get into a group so you can talk about this process, talk about what was difficult, what was good, anything you want. And then people will be able to share one at a time something that came up in the group or that they're thinking about. And then I'm going to go around the circle and ask if people can share who they wrote their legacy letter to and what it was about. Does everybody understand? Great. So Randall, would you get us started?
Okay, so the idea of getting centered is to have your mind just be here and not all the places we've been. So if you'd close your eyes and be aware of the sensations of your whole body from head to toe. Take your awareness all the way out to your skin and notice if you can feel the tingling feeling of your skin surrounding your whole body. And then gently, gently bring your awareness further inside and become aware of the sensation of breathing. Let the breath come all the way in, take in as much breath as you need, and let it go all the way out in exhalation, feeling it. And then take your awareness back to your skin. And then slowly open your eyes.
I'd like a little more of that. That was very nice.
That particular process was developed by a psychologist named Richard Carson. So just so you know.
Well, thank you.
Karen, we have 9 people with Brian, so we could have groups of 3 if that's okay with you.
That sounds great.
Okay. 10 minutes?
Yes. And this is just a discussion. One person doesn't talk and then another person, you just all talk to each other. Brenda?
Just a second. I'm moving.
Yeah, I came
moving.
back. I was in a group.
Okay. Oh, you were in a group. Okay.
Yep.
You shouldn't have been because I made
There
you a
were
host.
4 though, so I just came out.
Okay. Great. All right. Perfect. And let me see what Brian should be in room 3. I have to assign Brian differently. Why it's doing this?
Randall must be in a group too. Did you get assigned to a group, Randall?
I was, but then it just got pulled out.
I did too, and I just came back.
So I don't know who's in that group now. There was Brian and and Jim, and I don't know who else. There wasn't a third person, so I don't know what happened.
Brian, Carolyn, and Jim are in the group.
Okay.
Sorry
good.
about that.
That's
There's
okay.
one box I need to check that says to not put the facilitators in, the co-hosts, and I
Mhm.
forgot to uncheck that.
Okay.
All right, so
So now that you've had an opportunity to talk with each other about legacy letters, does anyone have any questions or comments before we do our harvesting? Carolyn?
It was a little weird because to begin with, I was in a group of 4 and I had just started to talk, and then suddenly I was out of that and in another group.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then by the time the first 2 people talked, the time was up. So it was a little weird.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I'm sorry about that. Sandy?
I don't remember what we're supposed to do during this next segment. If you could repeat it, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask, just like we always do, like a dyad or a group, and then we do harvesting where we each get to say something if we want to. That's only instead of just taking volunteers, I'm going to go around and call on each person. And if you're willing, I'd like you to share what you wrote, who you wrote your legacy letter to, and what it was about, just in a couple of sentences, not a long thing. And then pass if you don't want to share that, please. So for first, let's have Carolyn and Brian and Sandy.
Well, I didn't write it to anyone in particular, actually. But I wrote about how I'm not good at small talk, and I go to like an art opening or something and I come home feeling empty because I didn't make the deeper connections. And then how I've experimented and learned about how to be present and make a connection, a real connection with somebody, even if I don't know what to say. Thank you, I've spoken.
And we have heard.
We have heard.
We have heard.
Am I next? Okay. My grandchildren are in their 20s, and I wrote to them, here are some of the big life lessons, expect change and don't expect life to be fair. So I've spoken.
And we have heard.
We have heard.
It's so hard not to respond to what people say.
Oh, I know.
Hi. I said that I wrote it to a niece, but actually she's a younger second cousin. And I wrote about an experience that happened many years ago that I regret that it happened. And won't go in the details of that, but my blessing to her at the end was, may you notice your true thoughts and feelings and share them skillfully at an appropriate time. And I have spoken.
And we have heard.
We have heard.
Polly and Steve and Maureen.
I wrote a letter to my 2 nieces about the time when my father, their grandfather, was dying. And it was about my kind of obsession with trying to find the right words to say to him and not succeeding, and then realizing that I love you was enough. And that was my blessing to them, to remind them to say it often to the people they love, and to wish them an ever-expanding circle of people to whom they say that. Then I have spoken.
And we have heard.
So mine was actually to my daughters, and I've done a couple of these actually, and this is one that I kind of circle back to, and I kind of focused on this particular point in my life as I was teaching a Mozart class having to do with various personality traits, and it came out of an incident that happened on my commute in the morning driving through the Santiago Canyon, where a car pulled in front of me and made an immediate U-turn and put me in a position where I almost couldn't avoid a collision. And my first reaction was, so as we were all stopped in the middle of the road, trying to sort out what happened, I looked up at the windshield with this card just kind of yelled out to the point where it hurt my voice. What were you thinking? And then I spent the rest of my drive back trying to figure out what the person was in fact thinking. I was trying to empathize with them. And at first I thought, well, they must have just made a wrong turn. But why did they do that? Why did they turn the way they did when they had so many other opportunities to do it differently? And then I thought, well, maybe they were waiting to cut off. And so I went a little farther, and they didn't turn at the first opportunity. They didn't turn at the second opportunity or the third or fourth opportunity. They just kept on going. And left me kind of wondering, as this person drove off and I had to turn off, that something must have really happened in their life. And it was possible this person was actually trying to commit some sort of like either suicide or get in an accident, so they'd have a reason to say that, that whatever was going on in their life wasn't actually an issue. So I really came to empathize with that person, and I found that to be very helpful in terms of dealing with some of these situations. You don't often know where people are at in their lives, and so that's something I wanted to pass on, so not only to my students in Mostar, but also obviously to my daughters. And I have spoken.
And we have heard.
We have heard.
I wrote about, I wrote a letter to my son, who was really the impetus for me being in the course anyway, and for reading the forgiveness book and just doing all the work in the course. So my letter is telling him the lesson I learned in his absence. That was very deeply needed and spiritually centered. And so my last sentence to him was, "Love for another is an unavoidable roller coaster ride. May you be present in the joy of many mountains and lean on a sustaining wisdom through any and all of your valleys. I love you." That I have spoken.
And we
We have
have
heard.
Jim, Yvette, and Jaya.
I didn't complete the I tried writing, and I got very emotional. I'm estranged from my children, my adult children and my grandchildren, and over a storm in the teacup, which isn't even, it's not even worth trying to muster up to try and explain to you, other than these things happen in my relationship with my family, have been happening from day one. And I could put a label on it, but I don't want to. I just, I know I've got to do it. I know I need to do it, but I'm not feeling easy about it at all. In actual fact, as I said to my group, I was thinking of just writing them all off and just leaving everything to Help the Age, which is a charity over here in the UK, because I think that I've had more love and more affection from them than I did my own family, and it's complicated. So I think you got the message as to why I wasn't able to write a satisfactory letter with blessings. I have spoken.
And we have
I
heard.
have heard.
We have heard.
I wasn't too sure what we were going to do this time, but it was great listening to Steve and Jayla about how to compose a legacy letter, and hearing so far everyone else. I don't have children. I don't have relatives that are still alive. I have some very good friends, and I would probably send a legacy letter to a very dear friend, and in support of what's important to me has been the value of my spiritual practice, my meditation, and understanding the meaning of impermanence, and how that has seen me through a lot of difficulties, especially when I had open heart surgery, and how just being with a spiritual teacher and knowing that this is not the end saved me a lot of suffering. So, and I have spoken.
And we have heard.
We have heard.
I haven't, as soon as I can get settled enough from unpacking and dealing with some things, my intention is to do a letter, ongoing letter to my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It'll be ongoing, covering my life from birth to present, and it will be sent in monthly, covering a span of time that would be inspirational, motivational, and some keys and some tips on how to navigate through their coming world. I have spoken.
And we have heard.
And we have heard.
Just like when we shared the blessings and they were all wonderful, all your legacy letters sound wonderful. I'm really happy that you're having this opportunity to do it. Randall, it's all yours.
Okay. So I'd like to end this section with a poem by Nikki Giovanni from her book, My House. It's Legacies by Nikki Giovanni. Her grandmother called her from the playground. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I want you to learn how to make rolls, said the old woman proudly. But the little girl didn't want to learn how, because she knew, even if she couldn't say it, that would mean when the old one died, she would be less dependent on her spirit. So she said, I don't want to know how to make no rolls, with her lips poked out. And the old woman wiped her hands on her apron and saying, Lord, these children. And neither of them ever said what they meant. And I guess nobody ever does. So this poem beautifully depicts how difficult it can be to know how to pass on a legacy. But I think this little girl would have been thrilled to receive her grandmother's recipe for rolls, along with a legacy letter after her beloved grandmother died. Now that we've finished exploring the fourth topic, leaving a legacy, what I'm hoping you'll take away from it is a personal goal to consciously leave behind a legacy. That will affect how people who you care about will remember you. One way to do this is by writing a legacy letter for the people you leave behind. And even more exciting, you can give them legacy letters while you're still alive. Giving someone a legacy letter is a wonderful gift to show how you love them. Just one second here. Okay, but legacy letters are only one way to consciously and intentionally create your legacy. We're now going to begin the discussion of our fifth core topic, a life of service. There are many ways that elders can be of service, but in this workshop, we're going to focus on what could be the most crucial issue for our time, the climate crisis. In From Aging to Saging. So this is one way you can serve. In From Aging to Saging, Rabbi Zalman wrote about the, quote, Gaia hypothesis, which was proposed in 1975 by James Lovelock. He was, just a personal note, I read his book, and he's a pretty far out guy. Had some pretty, what were thought to be pretty extreme theories that are unfortunately coming out to be sort of true. According to his hypothesis, the entire range of living matter on Earth, from whales to bacteria, from oaks to algae, could be regarded as constituting a single living entity, endowed with faculties and powers far beyond those of its constituent parts. Rabbi Zalman goes on to write that, like thoughtless, immature children, intent on fulfilling our own needs, we have assaulted the planet and taken advantage of Gaia's generosity, unaware of the adverse consequences of our mother's health, on our mother's health. I guess of our, but seems like it should be on. Now, as adult children with a sense of gratitude for Gaia's loving kindness, we need to become planetary caregivers, undertaking the admittedly long-term project of restoring her to health. Rabbi Zalman wrote this in 1995. And of course, almost 3 decades later, we are much more aware of the adverse consequences, so it is even more urgent that we act. When elders fight climate change, they are also contributing to their legacy. Harry R. Moody, who plays many roles in the aging community and is also an honored sage for Saging International, has a blog called Climate Change in an Aging Society. In his blog on March 24, 2023, Moody quoted Bill McKibben, who is a well-known environmentalist and founder of Third Act, an organization which organizes people over the age of 60 for action on climate and justice. McKibben was also one of the founders of 350.org, 350.org, a global climate justice network. McKibben has said that so far the kids have had to do all the work, and they've done an amazing job. But it's not fair to ask 18-year-olds to solve this problem. Older people have got money and structural power coming out of our ears. We have to show young people we have their back. In 2020, the number of people aged 60 and older outnumbered younger children younger than 5 years old. So we elders can definitely make a difference. Before we begin our discussion of a life of service, I'd like to share another poem from the Sages Tao Te Ching by William Martin. It's titled Ready to be of Service. The sage is old enough now to see through success and failure. Those illusions no longer dominate. The sage has climbed up ladders, climbed down ladders, and fallen from ladders. Now, with feet firmly on the ground, the sage is ready to be of service to others, not to get something from them, but for the pure pleasure of it. We've traded services for money all of our life. We have forgotten the joy of serving, simply because it is our nature. As a sage, we may still be paid for our services, but that's no longer the determining factor. When the opportunity for service arises, we no longer weigh the possible return. We are free to serve according to our nature. So what can we, as individuals, do about climate change? When I ask this question, I don't mean to make anyone feel guilty about not doing enough. That's what people who are really guilty want. Here's an example. According to Madeline Jubilee Saito, who drew a 2022 op comic in the Los Angeles Times titled Power to the People, Together We Can Stop the Climate Crisis, the idea of a personal carbon footprint was created and popularized by a major oil company, our old friend BP. BP introduced the idea in an ad campaign starting in 2004 to shift the blame for the climate crisis away from themselves and onto consumers like us. In fact, researchers estimate that just 90 global corporations are responsible for nearly 2/3 of all the world's carbon emissions since 1880. Because of this, it isn't enough that we focus on our personal carbon footprints. Altogether, we also have to fight for systemic change while also doing whatever we can about it as individuals. Of course, the famous Margaret Mead quote comes to mind. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So, what can you and I do? Like many other climate experts, Catherine Hayhoe, the chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy, says the most important thing we can do to fight climate change is to talk about it. we can, how can we change something this huge and scary if we don't even talk about it? In her TED talk, Hey Ho says 2/3 of the people never talk about climate change, and 3/4 of the media never talk about it either. So as part of this Deepening the Sage Within retreat, we're going to talk about climate change, climate crisis. Catherine also says that the goal of the conversation is not merely to tell people about climate change, but actually she and all of the experts say that just giving someone more data about climate change is not effective. Rather, the goal is to expand the number of people in the conversation. She says that her challenge is to talk with the people around us, to talk about why it matters, and to work together to find solutions that we can do on our own or with our community. So please take out handout number 16, breakouts talking about climate issues. Our tech host is going to put us into random breakout groups of 3 or 4 people for 15 minutes. And we'll talk about talking about climate issues. Please refer to the handout with Catherine Hayhoe's questions. Is talking about climate change as important as Catherine says it is? Do you hesitate? Brenda, there's some sound happening. I'm wondering if everybody's muted. Is talking about climate change as important as Catherine says it is? Do you hesitate to talk about climate because you feel you don't know enough? Or because you think it's too late? Do you feel that promoting enough climate change to really make a difference will require too much sacrifice? And if you do try to talk to people about it, who would you talk to? In what situations? And how do you think they might react? Do you have any questions about this before we go into the groups? Okay, so we're going to have 15 minutes. Is that right? Karen, is it 15-minute group? You're muted.
Let's make it 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, so we have 10 minutes to have this discussion. See you soon. Brenda, I was in a room again. Okay, so would anybody like to share some of the wisdom you're taking from your discussion? Please don't just repeat what others said. Instead, please share wisdom you took from the sharing.
Well, I'm really grateful because Yvette shared with us a prayer, she says, for animals in nature instead of being angry. And I needed to hear that.
That's beautiful.
Mhm.
Have you spoken?
I have, thank you.
We have heard.
Heard.
Who else?
Steve?
Yes, thank you. I think one of the things that that our group kind of talked about a bit was, you know, is it going to help? Is it really going to do anything? And certainly, is talking going to do anything if we can't affect change? And so, my personal takeaway was that, you know, we've got to talk about it because we can't afford not to affect change. You know, I think we all can say that within our lifetimes, we've seen a lot get a lot worse. And it's clearly going to go on like this, and we don't know just how much worse it's going to get, how quickly it's going to get. I think it surprised a lot of people, if you follow this stuff, just how much weather systems have changed and how much ocean currents are going to change and things like this. That's the real problem. So I don't think we have a choice in the matter. And even if we're not concerned about the environmental side of it, you know, we do have to look at just resource application. And I pointed out a thing that I got a speeding ticket once in Arizona, driving across country, and the police officer gave me a speeding ticket for the excessive use of a non-renewable resource. I was driving too fast, I was wasting gas. And so it really drove the point home, and I'm still talking about it this many years later. This was probably 20 years ago. So that I've spoken.
And we have heard.
We have heard. Anybody else? Okay, nobody else wants to say anything. Steve just said we don't know how much worse it's going to get, but I do want to tell you that James Lovelock said by the mid-century, he said it's all going to hit the fan. He said Europe's going to become a desert. Much of the United States and lower, you know, it's going to be too hot to live in. It's going to be really, really bad if people don't take this seriously. Really, really. He said it's like extreme emergency and people are just not getting it. Okay.
I'll add that, you know, at least part of what it felt like we were also saying, and I put it in words, is we're just not willing to become uncomfortable.
We're not willing to become comfortable. Can't hear you quite well.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. We're not willing to become uncomfortable. To make the changes that would be necessary mean that we have to give up some of the things that we just think we're entitled to.
Right.
You know, oh, did you finish? I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah, I've spoken.
I heard you.
Heard.
I also wanted to say, you know, that I'm actually encouraged by the spike we have had in the manufacturing of electric vehicles. Now they're talking about electric commercial airline flight, which is, they're saying we practically have already anyway. My brother was an airline pilot for 35 years, and you know, they mostly sit in the cockpit and the plane does the rest. But to not burn fuel, you know, and to run on AI and all of that. I think we're also about to enter an age of technology that those of us in this room can hardly imagine.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of positive as well as responsibility that comes with it, but I think it can help us solve some things. I have spoken.
We have heard. Anyone else? Carolyn.
You know, it's real challenging for me about electric cars because eventually that'll make a big difference because more electricity will be coming from renewable resources. But right now, electricity, much of it is still being from coal burning oil plants. So, you know, it's like, so I have an electric car. That's just putting it down further down the line. And it really frustrates me. That's all. I just wanted to say that.
Although I do wonder that if it's coming from a single source, efficiencies, you know, I'm sure the efficiencies of one source is more efficient than, you know, millions of sources from each car. So it might be a little bit less, but it's not still burning fossil is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
You know, if you think about it, we used to heat our homes with wood too. You know, not very long ago. I mean, my grandmother, you know, when she was a little girl, and we're far from that. And I've also noticed a lot of people are growing hydroponics. It's becoming this huge thing now to grow your own vegetables using hydroponics, which I'm going to investigate trying myself. I have spoken.
We have heard.
I live in a little mountain town in Colorado, and half the people here still heat with wood.
Mm. It's a nice smell, but it kind of makes a lot of smoke.
You know, one of the things too that that I was looking at the show on Netflix about aging. It's about the people who live 100 years old. I think it might have been another. It was that show or another show where they was talking about how the production of meat is really bad for the climate. Just growing the meat, you know, animals, you know, growing them and slaughtering them and eating them. And so it's like it was an incentive for me not to, which I haven't eaten meats since 1970, but I do eat seafoods and poultry. But I think that is something to think about is what are some of the things that we are contributing to that is affecting the climate? Like, for instance, those of us who eat meats. Well, I eat chicken. Well, of course, they grow millions of chickens, you know, and it still is doing the same thing. So I think it boils down to maybe just our basic things and lifestyle changes that we can make that could make a difference. Not the big things like the electric cars and all of that, but I mean, I know, for instance, I don't burn lights. I don't run too much. I don't let water run if I don't have to. And I keep the lights off. And if I see lights on all over the place, little lights from my gadgets, I try to turn those off. So I think those are just some basic little things that we can do that will help. It may not seem like it, but I think in the long run it will. And then driving cars. I mean, if we don't have to drive a car, then ride a bus, we can do that. But, you know, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we could do that would be that we can actually do.
Jaya, that's a perfect segue into the next section of the workshop. We're going to talk about that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I've spoken.
We have heard.
Yeah, we have heard.
We've heard.
So at the beginning of the workshop, we talked about how important it is to have a community with whom we consciously age and sage. Bill McKibben has also repeatedly said that when people ask me what's the most significant thing you can do for the climate, I say stop being an individual, join something. Here's a suggestion. There are really two wonderful nonprofit communities to know about and perhaps to join. But both of them partner organizations, and both of them are partner organizations to Sage International. The first is the Elders Action Network. Does anyone belong to this group or know about it? Brian? And the second is a subgroup.
Could we say what we know about it? Randall?
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Brian? You're a member of Elders Action Network?
I was going to say, one of the things I really appreciate about them is their actions include maintaining democracy and climate and civil discourse. So you can focus on that which is the most important action that you feel that you need to take. And there's a show called Turning Points, which Saging International does, and they recently interviewed, I've forgotten his name, the guy who started the Elders Action Network. So that's an interesting interview. So I've spoken.
And we have. I'm also a member of Elders Action Network, and I love this organization. I'm in the book group, which meets online, so people from all over the world can be in it, and it's a wonderful book group.
The second group is a subgroup of the Elders Action Network that's more focused, Elders Climate Action. which was co-founded by Paul Severance, a former president of Sage International. This group currently has 16 regional chapters. Does anyone know about this group? Karen.
Can you repeat the name, Randall?
Elders Climate Action.
Oh, right, okay. No,
Uh,
I've never heard.
We have a local chapter
was
here
gonna say.
yeah, we have a
Oh,
local
right.
chapter here in Minnesota. And so we can meet in person with that group, but some people still also come into the meetings online. So if you haven't heard of these two organizations, I really suggest you check them out. They're really cool.
The organizations are in the chat.
Great.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I'd like to take just a moment or two for anyone else to share the name of any other groups or organizations that you particularly feel are particularly effective, and or do you donate money to or time to. Excuse me. Do you have any? Yeah,
Greenpeace
Carolyn.
is one.
Hmm?
Greenpeace.
Greenpeace.
Yeah.
Mine is a local one. It's called Citizens for Healthy Environment, and it's about fighting fracking. Because I live in a little pristine River Valley mountain town, and we've been fighting fracking for years. We have some fracking wells, but it could get a lot worse. And so that to me feels really important, because we grow enough food in this valley to feed ourselves. Fresh greens from down the road year round, and meat that's grown locally and small, organically. And so I just feel really strongly about protecting my own area. Thanks. I've spoken.
Thank you.
And
We have heard. Okay. Anything else? Then Karen, I hand the baton to you.
Okay.
Oops.
So now we're going to talk about what we can do as individuals, which you guys ended up talking about in your harvesting. So back to Catherine Hayhoe again. She has a book called Saving Us, A Climate Scientist's Case for Hope and Healing in a Divided World, which is a wonderful book. And she says that every year she adds 2 new low carbon habits to her life. And she says it's because it's the right thing to do. And she says taking action inspires her and helps her inspire others. And she has this wonderful quote that I'm going to read to you about why it's good to do these carbon things, even though they're really just small things. She says, when you do this, it knocks over the first domino, reminding me that action is possible. What I do gives me something to talk about, and it builds efficacy in others as I share with them, without lecturing or hectoring, what I've been doing and how I feel about it, which is what you guys were just starting to do in that harvesting. So if you take out handout 17, ways to reduce carbon footprint. Okay, this comes from an article called 50 Ways to Reduce Your Carbon Footprint. And for your handout, we just put 20 or 21 of them. And what I'd like you to do now is to look over these ways that you can reduce your carbon footprint and see if you can find 2 that you're not currently doing that you would like to do in the future, and put a check by them. If you're doing all of them, that's fantastic. They don't need to put any checks. But if you can find 2 that you're not doing right now, I'll just give you a couple minutes to do that.
Come on.
You'll see that some of them that you mentioned during that harvesting are on there.
I'm going to share the screen if people want it.
I think everybody's got their handouts now.
Oh, okay,
Anybody doesn't have their handouts? Yeah, I think they got them, Brian.
okay. Oh, sure.
Okay, so now we're going to go into,
There we go.
there isn't anything to be sharing right now.
I'm trying not to.
Oh, okay.
This takes.
Okay, so now we're going to go into
Computer is slower than I
dyads.
am.
We're going to go to dyads so that you can share what 2 things you've picked, if you have, what surprised you on here, how many of those did, there's a couple that I didn't know about that I was really excited to see when I first saw this chart, or read the article. So if we could go into dyads and one person speaks about what they have chosen and the other person listens, then the other person speaks, and if there's time left over, you can just talk to each other. Any questions about this? Holly?
How much time did you say?
Oh, I didn't say how much time. 10 minutes.
Karen, there are 9 people, so would either you or Randall like to be in a group?
Sure. You want to do that, Randall, or do you want me to? You're muted, Randall. You're muted, Randall.
You're welcome to go ahead, Karen, if you'd like to.
Well, you can if you want to.
I don't particularly care to.
Okay.
I don't need to.
Okay, great.
Or I cannot do it if.
No, I'm fine with it.
I end up getting stuck in a room every time, Brenda.
Well, there's a reason for that. I'll tell you in just a minute. Me too.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to say after doing the dyad before we go on to the next part of this section of the workshop?
I was supposed to meet Yvette today. That's all I know.
What?
I was supposed to meet Yvette today.
I don't know what that means.
I'm like, it's fortuitous that I have met.
Oh, okay. Synchronicity.
Okay.
Good. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just like to say, I've really enjoyed the partners that I've had, but it would be so nice to meet somebody else instead of always being
Yeah.
with the same people.
Yeah,
Polly, what happened to you? We lost you.
I guess it was supposed to be 2s, so then I got moved.
Oh, okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so now that we've looked at some things that individuals can do, we're going to watch a TED Talk called How to Find Joy in Climate Action by the speaker, Dr. Ayana.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ayana, I usually can say that. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. She's a marine biologist, policy expert, and conservation strategist. And in her talk, she's going to tell us that it's good to do some things like lowering the carbon footprint, like we've discussed. But she also says we need to find out what our special talents or our superpowers are so that we can contribute those. So if you'll take out handout 18, Climate TED Talk Notes. You probably aren't going to want to take lots of notes about the video. There's a few things though, but I thought you might want to take notes on what you're thinking about as you're listening to the video. And then we're going to go into eventually we're going to go into groups and discuss it too. So if Brenda can key up this video, we're going to listen to it. How to find joy in climate change, what was it?
Okay.
Climate action.
I'm gonna try to share this with a recording, but I think it's not gonna allow me with the recording. That's one of the things that, but let's just try it one more time.
Oh, I forgot to
Here we
mention that she talks about ikigai, which is a Japanese concept that means life purpose or raison d'etre. So ikigai means trying to define your personal meaning in life.
People often ask me what they can do to help address the climate crisis. But what they usually mean is what's one quick, easy, simple thing they can do? Well, that particular ship has sailed. The climate challenge is gargantuan, thanks largely to fossil fuel executives and the PR firms and politicians doing their bidding. We need to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions from electricity, transportation, agriculture, industry, and buildings. We need to protect and restore ecosystems. We need to change society, policy, economy, and culture. This is about transformation, and the stakes for humanity are greater than my heart and mind can fully fathom. So I find the best way to cope with this is to avoid dwelling on the terrifying scientific projections and instead pivot quickly to solutions. Now, the climate movement and the media all too often ask each of us to do the same things, to vote, protest, donate, spread the word, lower our carbon footprint. That term, by the way, carbon footprint, was popularized by fossil fuel corporations in an attempt to put the blame on us as individuals. But yes, it is good to do those things. I do those things. However, all too rarely are we asked to contribute our special talents, our superpowers to climate solutions. And what a failing, for that would actually enable the radical changes we need. So, where do we each begin? Here's my best answer. A Venn diagram. The first circle is, what are you good at? What are your areas of expertise? What can you bring to the table? Think about your skills, resources, and networks. The second circle is, what is the work that needs doing? Are there particular climate and justice solutions that you're keen on? Think about systems level changes, things that can replicate or scale, things like composting initiatives, insulating buildings, restoring wetlands, getting climate candidates elected, and electrifying everything. There are heaps of options. The third circle is, what brings you joy or satisfaction? There is so much work to be done. Please do not choose something that makes you miserable. This is the long haul, so it's critical to avoid burnout. Choose things that enliven you. The goal is to be at the heart of this Venn diagram for as many minutes of your life as you can. If you're familiar with the Japanese concept of ikigai for finding your purpose, you can consider this a simplified, climate-focused version of that. Taking this approach will enable way more progress on climate solutions than if we each obsess about our individual footprints. For example, 9 months after being inspired when I took him to his first climate protest, Boris Kentov, a financial tech executive, launched a climate impact investing fund. And honestly, I don't care if Boris never goes to another protest again. Sarah Stillman, a journalist who covers systemic injustices in immigration and workers' rights, has started including a deep and nuanced climate context for these issues in her reporting. And my own mother, a retired English teacher, became a small but mighty part of getting fracking banned in New York State, and is now mothering chickens and converting her lawn into a model for small-scale regenerative farming. I call these climate action Venn diagrams, and having now seen many of them, endearing crayon versions by children, delightfully detailed versions by adults, this is one of my favorites. I have a few additional parameters to offer before you draw your own. This does not necessarily mean you should quit your job or go start a nonprofit. Quite possibly, you are most powerful in your existing roles where you already have specialized knowledge and robust networks. So how might you lean into those talents? Can you help your town, company, church, or school charge ahead with climate solutions? Because what we need is change in every sector and in every community. And be gentle with yourself on the "what are you good at" question. Set your insecurities aside and simply consider what you have to offer. Over the last year since I've been sharing this concept, lots of people have been drawing their own and posting them on Instagram. It's been super exciting to see what people have been coming up with. But I've noticed that a lot of them are landing on some version of communicate about climate. Now, I fully appreciate the irony, given that I am standing here talking to you about climate, but we can't all just talk about it. We need doers. We need mutual aid organizers and city council members. We need green building retrofitters and wind turbine installers and bike lane planners. We need culture shapers and policy nerds. We need employees pushing their corporate employers to change. Here's where I will offer what I consider to be the sexiest word in the English language: implementation. Because we already have most of the solutions we need. We need to get to work and to pick up the pace. We need to build the biggest, strongest team possible to tackle this most enormous challenge humanity has ever faced. Another word I love that is perfect for this moment is leaderful. I learned this term from Black Lives Matter activists who use it as an organizing principle. Social movements can be fragile when they're helmed by a few prominent leaders. We need many leaders to accelerate this transformation from a fossil-fueled economy to a regenerative one. Maybe you are one of those leaders, or maybe you don't want to be out front. That is more than okay. This is not about being a hero or an influencer. This is about being useful and advancing solutions. Contribute to an existing effort, make it possible, build the website, raise the funds, plan the events, recruit the talent. The question should not merely be, what can I do to help address the climate crisis, but what can we do together? Join something. And if you need a bit of inspiration, here is a list of some climate solutions to consider. So what will you do? Or how will you step it up? Actually draw this out. What are you good at? What is the work that needs doing? And what brings you joy? Also, try to avoid diagramming your way to what you're already doing. Think about this expansively. Start with a blank slate and consider how you can make your best impact. Remember, this is about action. I've emphasized the importance of everyone contributing to climate solutions. So before I close, I want to mention one of the major barriers to participation: inequality. Perhaps you know that around the world, it's people of color who are most heavily impacted by the effects of climate change, whether that's air pollution, hurricanes, droughts, or floods. But you may not know that it is also people of color who are most concerned about climate and most likely to want to be a part of the solutions. In the US, where we have robust data on this, 49% of white Americans are concerned about climate, compared to 57% of Black Americans and 69% of Latinx Americans. Imagine the huge and additional contributions these folks could make if unburdened from the dangerous distraction that is racism. And goodness, do we need all of that ingenuity and leadership. In other words, help us help you. Help us all save the planet. My last challenge to you then, since all our fates are intertwined, is in addition to leveraging your talents, can you help others in using theirs? And let's work to demolish the societal barriers that prevent people from fully devoting themselves to climate solutions. This is what I know. There are innumerable possible futures. I know we each get some say in which future we'll collectively have and a chance to help build it. I know that every 10th of a degree of warming we prevent, every centimeter of sea level rise we avoid, every bit of nature we protect and restore matters. I know that our actions add up. This is an invitation. Find your role if you haven't already. Encourage others to find theirs. Averting climate catastrophe. This is the work of our lifetimes. Thank you.
And now let's take a 5-minute break.
Hello.
So Brenda's going to try even harder to get people into different breakout rooms. And she said, if you go into a room, don't take yourself out, because once you do that, she can't do anything. That's why she had trouble in the past. So stay wherever you go, and she's going to fix it, hopefully. So we're going to go into dyads now to talk about the TED Talk. Anything that you want to talk about. I love the way she gave you a couple words and many other things. So we're going to do that for 10 minutes.
All right, it worked that time, Randall, because I took the co-hosting responsibilities away from Brian and Karen, and so you're the only one who stays with me.
Okay. Karen wanted to
That's
go
the
in the home.
problem, is that we're using our co-host as people in our rooms, and that's not normally what we do.
Right.
Now I'd like you to take out handout 19, video response, climate TED Talk. And here you find the Venn diagram that she talked about.
Yep.
And the 3 circles. What are you good at? Your skills, resources, and networks. What brings you joy? And what needs to be done? Climate justice and solutions that are needed. For your homework, I'd like you to do this exercise. I was in it with a person in the dyad that she'd already started doing this during the talk. So maybe some of you have also done that. But I'd like you to try to do this at home. And when we come back next week, this will be our check-in, what we came up with in the Venn diagram. And if you don't like Venn diagrams for some reason, just look at the questions and see what your response might be. You could use that for your check-in too. Does anyone have any questions about what I'm saying it's the homework? Jim has to leave us, so I want to make sure he has the homework.
Okay.
Everyone understand?
Mm-hmm.
Super, you guys are so easy.
Well, thank you, everybody. God bless. Speak to you next week.
Bye, Jim.
See you as
You're
well,
well,
Jim.
Jim. Nice seeing you.
Bye.
Yeah, you too. Bye now.
I think it's a good reminder that Karen reminded me of that she said in the talk that it's something I didn't hear, is like, try not to bring this around to putting in the middle what we're already doing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I can't remember what I already did.
Yeah, I was in the dyad with Carolyn, and I told her that I'm an educator, so the first thing I thought is I should teach something. Then I went, no, I've been wanting to be more of an activist. What is something I could do as an activist? So I like that she suggested that. Okay, so this is the end of the section on service, and we're going to go on to our next core topic now, which is embracing our mortality.
So we've now finished, now that we finished the life of service section, and in this section, we talked about talking about the climate crisis more often. You heard that Bill McKibben repeatedly said, stop being an individual, join something. And we also talked about how we could reduce our individual carbon footprint and what we could do that would bring us joy. Now we're going to discuss our last core topic, embracing our mortality. In From Aging to Saging, Rabbi Zalman says, to harvest our lives successfully, we must come to terms with our mortality. And he says, as we approach the subject of our mortality, let's be clear from the beginning. Death is not a cosmic mistake. Woven into the warp and woof of existence, the presence of death deepens our appreciation of life. It also regenerates our psyches in preparation for harvesting. The more we embrace our mortality, not as an aberration of God and nature, but as an agent urging us onto life completion, the more our anxiety transforms into a feeling of awe, thanksgiving, and appreciation. As what Rabbi Zalman says, we can complete our lives triumphantly. His idea to embrace mortality as an agent urging us on to life completion is fundamental to the Buddhist tradition. In this section of Deepening the Sage Within, we're going to explore the wisdom Buddhism offers us to help us complete our lives successfully. I'm going to begin our session on mortality with a poem titled Let Me Die Laughing by Mark Morrison Reed, a Black Unitarian minister. Please listen carefully and pick out any words or phrases that you particularly like. Afterward, I'll call on a few volunteers to share. Let Me Die Laughing by Mark Morrison Reed. We're all dying. Our lives always moving toward completion. We need to learn to live with death and to understand that death is not the worst of all events. We need to fear not death, but life, empty lives, loveless lives, lives that do not build upon gifts that each of us has been given, lives that are like living deaths, lives in which we never take the time to savor and appreciate, lives in which we never pause to breathe deeply. What we need to fear is not death, but squandering the lives we have been miraculously given. So let me die laughing, savoring one of life's crazy moments. Let me die holding the hand of one I love, and recalling that I tried to love and was loved in return. Let me die remembering that life has been good and I did what I could. But today, just to remind me that I am dying so that I can live, savor, and love with all my heart. In order to learn how to live with death, as Morrison Reed suggests, we're going to consider three concepts that are at the heart of Buddhism. I want to ask if everybody could mute their lines, please, because there's some kind of a sound line.
You forgot to do the harvesting on the poem.
Oh, okay.
I know it's the first time we've done it, so.
All right, so let's spend 5 minutes talking about this poem we just heard. Does anybody have anything to say about that beautiful poem that I just read?
Can you pick out any words or phrases that were meaningful to you and say why they were?
I love the title of the book.
Steve?
Yeah, one of the ones that kind of struck me was sort of an empty life, that you can go through your life without purpose, without mindfulness, and then at the end, it seems to have a certain emptiness to it. So that really struck me. I've spoken.
And we have heard. Polly?
It reminded it reminded me of a quote from Thoreau. I think it's from Walden, and I can't remember it word for word, but he wants to live life to the very marrow and not find when it's done that he hadn't gotten everything out of it that he could. And I wish I could remember the exact quote, but it's from Walden. I've spoken.
We have heard. I want to put in something. My mom was extremely afraid of death. She never made plans for after she died. She was just terrified of it. But you know, death came anyway. The fear didn't keep it from happening. It did spare her, though, in that she had a stroke, which immediately took away her consciousness. So she didn't experience dying, as far as I know. But the fear of death, living in fear, is maybe natural, but it doesn't protect us from death. So it's good to know that.
Carolyn?
Kubler-Ross always says that you can't fully live until you've accepted your death. And I am a home funeral guide, so I've worked with been with a lot of people when they're dying. And it's amazing the difference between those people that have accepted it and are going into it consciously and maybe have been meditators compared to those people that are really afraid of it. It's makes a big difference in having a good death or having kind of more ugly experience. I've spoken.
And we have heard.
We have heard.
Brian?
I think
Way-
I would like
Way
to.
back in
Oh, okay.
college, I read Carlos Castaneda's A Separate Reality. And in A Separate Reality, the big lesson there was making friends with death, or being aware that death was traveling with you. And that has made a big difference for me along the way, because again, I've spent a lot of time with people in the process of dying. I've spoken.
And we have heard.
We have heard.
Someone else started talking. Was it Jaya? Was it you?
I was the thing that struck out with for me was when he said to it was about fearing death, but not to fear death, but to I think he said regret the things that we haven't done that we want to do. And that's my biggest concern, is that I am able to, death doesn't, I don't fear death, but I do want to make sure that I will be able to do the things that I want to do, that's in my heart, that needs to be expressed. So, and the one thing that helped me to overcome the fear of death was reading a book by Sokyo Rinpoche by it's called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. An excellent book on how to die, how to live, and how to live to die, how to die and live, you know. So it's Sokyo Rinpoche. He's a Tibetan Buddhist.
Jaya, can you put that in this chat? That name?
I think I know how to spell it.
If you'll get close enough so we can Google it.
Okay.
Not to be a Debbie Downer, but I don't go to funerals. I mean, I just don't go. I went to my mother's memorial and I honored her there and everything, but a classic, like, you know, Western funeral seems like such an abomination to me. You know, I have this friend, she and I have agreed that when the time comes, that, you know, we want to be thrown into that biomass pile thing that they've got going on somewhere in the country, where all the corpses become, you know, biomatter and, you know, compost. And we joke about it and everything, but we kind of have this very you know, sanguine sort of feeling about and for some reason I have felt this way since I was very young. I don't know why, but even as a teenager, I remember saying, you know, you die alone, no one's going with you, better grab life by the horns, kind of, you know, and I have done that. There are things I still want to do, but I don't want to be, you know, like the heat, the fire that it takes to cremate a body is also, you know, speaking of climate action and stuff, pretty intense. So I really, I don't know, I just recently told my sister that if it comes down to it, you know, they're gonna find me floating down the Niagara River. Because I'll just be like, there I go. You know, but that's just me. So I've spoken.
We have heard.
We have heard, and we need to move on. When in person, I like, how many of you have heard of a death cafe? I like to start this workshop with that, where we begin with just talking about death, with no prompts, no readings, just whatever comes to mind. And that's a little bit what the discussion of our poem became, which is interesting. So Randall, you want to take us on our next journey?
In order to learn how to live with death, as Morris and Reed suggests, we're going to consider three concepts that are the heart of Buddhism: impermanence, acceptance of reality, and non-attachment. But before we start talking seriously about death and mortality, I want to share a couple of reflections on this topic that are more lighthearted, but at the same time that will help us look at death and mortality differently. One is the Greek myth of Titanus, a man who was granted immortality at the request of the goddess Eros. But after having enjoyed his immortality, he realized that every time he made a choice he regretted, he could just reverse his decision with another in the next moment, and therefore his life was meaningless. He asked the gods to restore his mortality. I'd also like to share a humorous but thought-provoking quote from the book, How Then Shall We Live by Wayne Mueller, or Mueller, I'm not sure, where Mueller quotes Susan Ertz. Millions yearn for immortality who don't know what to do with themselves on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Imagine if you had immortality and the power all went dead and you couldn't watch your favorite program for eternity, and you were stuck. You were stuck not being able to have entertainment for the rest of your immortal life. I can really relate to what Susan Ertz said. Can you? One Buddhist who writes about death is Stephen Levine. In his book, A Year to Live, How to Live This Year as If It Were Your Last, he makes a great analogy when he suggests that we shouldn't wait to begin preparing for death. He says, because we never know whether our next breath may be our last, being prepared for the immediate unknown becomes as practical as applying for a passport while still uncertain of our destination or time of departure. Without these first steps, the last steps can go badly. Another spiritual teacher who writes about death is Frank Otaseski, the founder of the first Buddhist hospice in the US and author of the book, The Five Initiations.
Invitations.
Thank you. The Five Invitations, discovering what death can teach us about living fully. And he was a student of Stephen Levine. He writes, life and death are a package deal. Death is not waiting for us at the end of a long road. Death is always with us in the marrow of every passing moment. She is the secret teacher hiding in plain sight. She helps us discover what matters most. And the good news is we don't have to wait until the end of our lives to realize the wisdom that death has to offer. Has anyone ever had an experience in which death was a teacher for you? So please, Carolyn, tell us about it.
Well, when I was the first person I was with that died was my father, and I was alone in the room with him when he died. And I learned so much from that experience because he fought it. And I was only in my 20s, and I stayed with him in the room for a while after he took his last breath. And then when I went to get my mom in the other room to tell her that he would pass, she was like, well, why didn't you call me, or, come in and get me? And it was like, because I didn't want to leave him right then, because hearing is one of the last things to go. And I knew that. And then, there's a lot more I could say about what happened after that I learned, but I really saw that was my first really knowing that there was some other way to be with death, and that learning how to let go rather than fighting it was going to be the way to to go forward. It was just so profound to me at that age, because I wasn't into my spiritual journey yet then or anything. And since then, I've been with a lot of other people that have died, including my mom and sister. And I just think it can be such a beautiful it's the same transition. We come in as a transition, we go out as a transition. It's all part of life. That's all I've spoken.
We have heard. Thank you. Anybody
We have
else?
heard.
Somebody else like to share?
I'd like to share a personal experience. When I had open heart surgery, and the doctors wanted to do a second surgery. I refused the second surgery, and they said, "Well, you have to take the second surgery if you want to do the first surgery." And I really took that to heart, in the sense that I had to get a mitral valve replaced. And I really took that to heart. Did I really want to put my body through that? And I really saw how my ego self, or my mind self, was totally involved in getting it all done, and how cowardly it was. It was like I was a witness to myself in two ways: the cowardly part, and the one that said, let it go, it's all right, you don't have to do it. So I remember saying to the doctors, I'm not going to do the second one. Sorry, either you do the first, but I won't put my body through that. And with that statement that I made to the doctors, they felt, okay, yeah, we see you live healthily. You have an active life, but you're moderate. You do your yoga, you do your vegetarian, you eat well. And so I had the first surgery, and it was fine. And what I've learned from Buddhism and death is that death and life are partners. Every time you look at life, it's always about death too, because if you don't have death, you can't start anything new. Oh, you were talking about that poem of mortality and life extension, and why do you want to live longer if you don't know what to do with your time? But I wanted just to add how we're dying the moment we're born. And we always think that, we're birthed and we're, it's a new life. Well, no, we are aging from the day we're born. So it's immediate. It's both of them come together, life and death. And I think if we appreciate it more in those terms, we wouldn't be so afraid of not knowing anything about death, because we lose our skin, we lose our hair. I mean, we're always shedding. We're always shedding our lives, whether it's a mental state or a physical state. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. We have heard.
We have heard.
Anybody else like to share? Polly?
I wanted to comment on, I think, Carolyn, you said something about hearing being the last thing to go when someone is dying. And when my mother was, she was just sort of fading away at 92, and she appeared to be unconscious, but we acted as if she could still hear us. And I didn't live in the same place, so I flew out to be there, and we were all gathered around her bed, and we played this music that she loved. It's a violin music, meditations from Thais, and she had had it played at my dad's memorial, and we knew we were going to play it at hers. So anyway, we played that music for her, and about 10 minutes later, she let go and she stopped breathing. And I think she heard that music. I have spoken.
We have heard. Brian?
I'll throw in what possibly is humorous. My brother had a fall and was in a coma for quite a while at Hennepin County Hospital, and they came to the point where they were saying, you know, it's time for you to make a decision, and we decided to unplug him. And so we were gathered around, and we unplugged him, and he almost immediately sat up and said, "What the fuck you doing?" and then he lived for a few more weeks. So, but if you knew my brother, that's him. Contrary to me.
You know, to be honest.
Oh, I've spoken. Yeah.
Oh,
We have heard.
We heard you and laughed. To be honest, you know, one of the reasons I'm here is because my mother passed away in July, and the description of my sisters who were on the West Coast taking care of her, and knowing how her life was lived and everything, I really, I guess that's kind of moment you're asking about is, you know, what has prompted me to think about how I want to go. And it's not that way. You know, she had never been offered an opportunity or maybe taken an opportunity like this one to embrace elderhood, to do a life review, to do forgiveness practice, to do, you know, all the stuff that I needed when I joined this course and I'm trying to do now, and to be sort of caught up instead of carrying baggage, you know, when that time comes. And, you know, no matter, I mean, I just wrote my will, in fact, and no matter how it might play out, I'm so glad to have had an opportunity to write a legacy letter to my son. I would not have done that if I were not in this class. And so, you know, if my death goes the way my life has, it'll be sloppy.
Yeah.
You know, but and it will be very, very imperfect. But as my friend Steve said, when I found out that he was dealing with prostate cancer, he said, it might just be my turn. And he was very calm about that. He said, it might just be my turn, which helped me to feel better about him, you know, the idea that I may lose him, but he's still here and he's doing good. So that's all well, I've spoken.
We have heard.
We have heard.
When I was, my dad suddenly passed out and he was going to die at home, and the caregiver revived him, which I wasn't sure was the best thing to do, but we ended up in the ER very shortly after that, and he was having heart failure. His lungs were all filled with fluid, and they wanted to put him on a respirator. But after considering very carefully and talking to, you know, his heart doctor and other friends, I decided not to do it. That meant he was going to die. So I sat down next to him. I said, Dad, I don't think you're going to survive this. And he said, how old am I? How old was he? And I said, 93, Dad. He said, almost 100. And so that was it, you know, and we sat there for a while, and friends came in and visited him. And after a while, he closed his eyes to take a nap, and then his breathing became very ragged because in the sleeping, he wasn't breathing deeply enough, and he poof, gone. Suddenly his heart started racing, and people started stopping by the door saying, we're sorry. And I said, what's going on? They said, oh, that's tachycardia or something. We can't stop that without shocking him to fix it. So, but you know, it just seemed like a totally natural thing to me. I had always been afraid of death because my mom was so afraid of death, but it just seemed so completely natural. It didn't seem like something bad.
I think we should move on, Randall.
We've got a hand up here. Shall I take
Oh,
care of it?
yes. Oh, I didn't see it. Yes, absolutely.
Very quick. I just want to say, Maureen, if you want to get in touch with me, I can tell you how you could probably have the kind of thing done with your body at the end that you might like better than.
Oh, how can we do that? Can I put my email address in the chat?
Why don't I'll put mine in there and you can email me. And then
Super.
okay.
Carolyn is in that line of work.
Oh, awesome. It's the organic way to go.
Yeah, maybe I'll be interested in that too. So I'd like to share a Buddhist story. Do you want me to share this now, or we're only got 7 minutes
Please.
left?
Yes, please.
Oh, hang on one second. Karen, will you want
I
me
have
to
no
share
idea
this?
what you're going to say, so I can't comment on
I was
it.
going to share the story of the mustard seed.
Oh, yeah, this is the next part of the workshop.
Yeah, should we just wait on that till next week?
No, I think we should go on.
Okay. So I want to share a Buddhist story, the parable of the mustard seed. There was a woman named Kisa Katami who lived at the same time as the Buddha. And she was devastated when her infant son died. She went from house to house in the village, begging for someone to give her a medicine to bring him back to life. But no one had that kind of medicine, so they suggested to go see the Buddha. The Buddha told her that he could bring her child back to life if she would bring him a mustard seed from one household that had never experienced death. After a futile search for even one mustard seed, Kisa realized how universal death was, and though she continued to grieve, she accepted life's impermanence. We know intellectually, of course, that we can't escape death. But even when we're old, sick, and have received a terminal diagnosis, many are still surprised when the actual end comes. If we don't accept the reality of mortality, we will suffer more than we have to. One illustration that Buddhists use to show how we suffer more than is necessary is the parable of the two arrows. We can't avoid having upsetting experiences, and when we have one, it's like being shot with an arrow. And we experience pain. Thus, the Buddhists say pain is inevitable in life. However, it's up to us whether we be shot with a second arrow, which brings suffering. It depends on how we react to the pain of the first arrow. Thus, the Buddhists say suffering is optional. If instead of immediately reacting negatively, we pause long enough in the face of pain to decide how to respond to that pain, as the Buddhists would say, skillfully. For example, if someone harms us, instead of immediately lashing out in anger, which can make the situation worse, we pause for a reflective moment to consider how to respond mindfully. But actually, the suffering we can't avoid is also very important because we learn from it. In his book, The Art of Living, Thich Nhat Hanh writes, if we don't experience suffering, how can we ever generate understanding and compassion? Compassion is born from understanding suffering. And without understanding and compassion, cannot be a happy person. Awakening and suffering always go together. So it's okay to suffer. We just need to learn how to handle it.
love that.
At the heart of Buddhism's
No,
teaching.
we'll stop here.
Okay.
I was going to leap on what Maureen said is a wonderful way to end the workshop. Did you say that again, Maureen?
What did I say?
Something about that's wonderful, or
It is
you
wonderful.
reacted to that quote.
Oh, I thought I was on mute. Oh, I just loved that awakening and suffering go together, and
Yeah.
it's just the way it is. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
And I think that's a beautiful way to end our workshop for today. So Randall can take us out. Does anyone have any questions or any comments you want to make before we close today? As usual, you did a wonderful job. I love the way you participate.
Refusing to accept pain is like somebody stubbing their toe and then getting so angry they slam their toe into the wall and have it do it all over again. So let's take a moment once again. You want to put out your candle first? Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
you could close us out and then I'll.
Okay. So once again, let's come back to ourselves, because that's really all we've got in the end. Come back into the boundaries of your body, that skin that surrounds your whole body. Feel that skin again. And bring your awareness more inside. And be aware of your breathing. This miraculous breathing that accompanies us through each moment of our lives. When we no longer breathe, as a friend says, Rick Carson, that therapist says, when we're no longer breathing, even our best friends aren't going to want to hang around with us very long. So be aware of your breathing. And once again, your body. Take stock of all the feelings, all the thoughts that are there in that bundle of you. And let's bow to each of us in this circle who have been here today in this virtual circle, who have shared with each other such beautiful things and spent this sacred time together. Feel free to open your eyes.
Okay.
Namaste, everybody.
I'm going to close the light, hoping that everybody takes the wisdom that they've gained during our time together out into the world.
Thank you all for being here. It's been really a pleasure being with you.
Likewise. Thank you, Randall. Thank you, Karen.
See you next week, hopefully.
Remember the home.
Thank you.
Remember, Karen gave you homework. Don't forget it.
They've done wonderful on their homework.
They have. Just wanted to remind them because it happened before the end. So it's good to remember. Oh, yeah, that's right. See you all later.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.